Do.
Oh, you're good. You're good. So welcome everyone out there in GenCon land to ASD at your FLGS, or Autism Spectrum Disorders at your friendly local game store. This panel is presented by the Bodhana Group, but we have a lot of lovely guests and colleagues that we have on the panel today. And we're going to go ahead and screen share just so we can kind of get into the meat and potatoes of everything. Please don't forget to hand in your tickets through the event details page if you have not yet done so. Additionally, please type any questions that you have into the chat. We will do our best to answer those questions while we go through. Additionally, we will hopefully have a little bit of time, not terribly too much, because we have another panel to jump to, but we will do our best to make sure that all things are answered. So without further ado, let's go ahead and... Wait, that's the wrong screen.
This is the most anticlimactic thing you've done today.
Yeah, well, and it probably won't be the last. The day is early yet.
Wait, are we allowed to mess with each other in between this? Because I would have put a question in the chat already.
You're going to troll your own panel? That's just silliness. All right, so as we have said, the panel is inclusivity in gaming. Everybody can see that okay, right? Okay, Autism Spectrum Disorders in your game and at your friendly local gaming store. So let us go and start with introductions. So hello everyone, I'm Jack Birkenstock Jr. I'm a master's level therapist that is about 24 years in the human services field. I worked with adjudicated youth, kids as young as 10, adults with disability as old as like in their mid to late 70s. My specialty over the 20 plus years of my career has been working with people who are perpetrators of or victims of sexual abuse. I've also worked with persons with varying disorders over the years and challenges. And for the last 11 years, I was a co-founder and executive director of the Bodhana Group, which is a 501c3 based in York, Pennsylvania. And we use all manner of tabletop games for education, skill building, and therapy. My nerdy fact, because we try to kind of offer a little bit of the nerd fun so you know that we're cool, is I've seen Ghostbusters over 375 times. I actually was able to quote it back and forth in college with a friend of mine, and everybody says, man, that's pretty nerdy. And I go, yeah, Jerry and I doing Ghostbusters for, about an hour and a half line by line was nerdy, but was it more nerdy that we had an audience of 35 people? So without that, then, Mr. James, go ahead and introduce yourself to us, sir.
Hi, James Kirk. That's my actual name. There's lots of people up here, so I'm going to go pretty quickly. I've been a therapeutic GM for the Bodhana Group for about 3 years. I've been volunteering for 5. I do carry my only degree, which is in awesome. I studied English with a concentration in theater when I was in college, and Gloomhaven is life.
Gloomhaven is life.
It's just the truth.
It's totally the truth. And coming to us from the wonderful state of New Jersey, go ahead, Brian. No, come on, Brian. You're on deck. I tapped you.
No, I was. This was for like the wonderful state of New Jersey. Like that was yeah. I was like, I don't know if I'll go that far.
Even in your own state, the hate. Wow.
Well, no, if you're gonna troll, you got to do it correctly. Like you start with yourself, and then you reach out to
everybody knows.
To you.
No, everybody knows that the troll is in Central Park.
My name is Dr. Brian Quinones. I am co-owner and founder at Gaming Approaches Towards Education. Relevant to this particular panel, I have been doing in-home and in-community therapy for child and adolescents for over 17 years now. And I am an alt-play certified mental health clinician. I am a registered play therapist supervisor. And I think that's good for now. I have an emotional support nerd, and his name is Tim.
Oh, hello. All right, so Tim, yeah, tell us about yourself, sir.
I am a game designer. I am also the co-founder and program director at Gaming Approaches Towards Education. I do mentoring and therapeutic game mastering here at Gaming Approaches Toward Education. And I've been consulting with Brian for, I don't even know how many years now on.
It's been about 7
games,
straight, dude.
Yeah, games to use in the field while he is going into the home practicing therapy.
All right.
Sam, I want you to note that Brian immediately was able to say how long you've been working together, which means he's been counting.
Well, you count, you know, yeah, it's like, when is it going to be over? It's like you're counting, like, you know, oh, it's still going. All right, this is, you know.
Right, and our final mystery guest, sign in, please. You're sitting next to Dorothy Kilgallen, and that's a reference even your grandparents don't remember. Go ahead, Mike.
So I'm Mike Fields. There's all my fancies. My background therapeutically is DIR floor time. I'm also a training leader for floor time. I'm kind of a zealot and look to convert others. I've been referred to as obnoxiously optimistic, and I said thank you. Fully embrace that. Just one last thing to add before I get going. That has been requested for this panel that all of my words are in song.
Requests?
Were you the one that requested it, Mike? You can be honest. It's okay. All right. But everyone loves your Fozzie hat because that is... No, it's a really great hat. And, you know, I thank you for wearing it.
Thanks, Kermit.
So, what are we here to talk about today? Well, first of all, I went over a little bit about Bodhana. Bodhana is a word meaning leading to an awakening or an understanding. And we kind of chose that because the approach that we take to gaming and the use of games in therapy, education, and skill building is that we don't want to make it overtly obvious that, you know, now is skill time or now is therapy time. We want to build all of this naturally into the fabric of what we're doing when we're running, whether it's a tabletop board game, a storytelling game, or a therapeutic RPG. We want to utilize these games in a very natural setting and a very natural approach, which kind of dovetails very nicely into what it is that we're going to be talking about in today's panel. So in short, there's our mission. Thank you. Good night. We'll see you all later. Nope. Seriously.
Bye.
Okay. No, seriously. Some of our services, in case you're interested, is we do offer board game and therapeutic role-playing groups. We run private pay as well as for organizations. We do offer consultation and training. So if you are a practitioner or an organization that would like gaming in your own practice, you can seek us out. We do offer continuing education if you need that through National Board for Certified Counselors. We're working on social work. But we also develop resources. Annually, we run the Save Against Fear Convention in October, which this year will be virtual. So please check that out online. We're actually getting ready to drop the link today to be able to submit sessions and or panels, which I know some of our fine panelists will be participating in. And then finally, we do offer a primer, a little book that we put together called Wizards, Warriors, and Wellness, which is a short introduction to concepts of therapeutic gaming and some of the benefits. You can get that on Drive Through RPG. All proceeds benefit our mission and our vision. So now that I've done the pitch, here's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to talk a little bit about autism spectrum disorders. We're going to talk about challenges and strengths that we might see from folks who are experiencing that condition. We're going to talk a little bit about how to handle crisis situations, specifically in a game store environment. But more importantly, and this is kind of one of our big goals and why I have my Golden Girls background and my thank you for being a friend shirt, is we're going to be talking about how to be more accommodating and how to be more inclusive within your gaming environment. And we get a lot of questions about this over the years where people are like, well, how do I make my game autism friendly? And spoiler alert, but this is something I like to spoil. It's not so much about making it autism friendly, but it's about making it friendly for a person on the spectrum. It's about the person, not the condition. There are some things that we can learn, or there are some modifications, and we're going to talk a little bit about, you know, what we've done in our own gaming environments and, you know, talk about those points. But it's really about setting up the table for success, based around inclusivity and also safety. So we're going to educate and enlighten. We're going to become more aware and responsive. We're going to learn how to be a resource, make gaming truly inclusive, and we're going to increase everybody's enjoyment. This is part of the Bodhana's Everybody Plays series. We are actually currently working on a version of this training that is going to focus on LGBTQ, gender identity and fluidity, and how to be more inclusive and accommodating in that type of circumstance as well. So who would like to start us off talking about what is autism spectrum disorder? What is that? Anybody want to dive in and take that one?
I'll go.
All right, take her, Mike.
So this is digging right into the DSM, and we'll explore the definition a little bit more as we go along too. But at least according to the DSM, ASD is a set of neurobiological developmental disorders, and some of the things that we can sometimes see: difficulty with communication, social interaction, repetitive and stereotypical behaviors. So some people refer to that as stimming, although I like to refer to that as self-regulatory things. It could be to stimulate or to calm and soothe. Repetitive interests, we'll dig into this more in a little bit, and sensitivity to sensory experiences. The DSM model does refer to it as a disorder, and this kind of focuses on pathology.
Yeah.
In that, and we'll come back around.
Yeah. Oh no, we will definitely break that down a lot more, because again, it's going to be one of the big underpinnings of the whole training today, where we talk about the fact that it really is a spectrum. And the reason that we call it a spectrum is because everybody with autism experiences it differently. You know, I can introduce you to 100 different people, and they will have 100 different unique experiences as to how their life is impacted or not impacted. You know, it drives me nuts when I see things like t-shirts that say autism rocks or things like that, because it's like, I mean, it's not only abusive and horrible, but it's also terribly misrepresentative. So here, of course, we have some great Hollywood examples. We have Rain Man, played by Dustin Hoffman. We have Max, I believe, what's the show? Parenthood, thank you. And then we have Grissom from, you know, the NCI, no, not at NCIS, CSI, thanks. Thankfully, my wife was in the room, is providing me with all the things I don't remember while I approach 48 tomorrow. But the thing about it being a spectrum is these are 3 different representations, and these don't even cover the wide array that's out there. So we're going to kind of dive a little bit deeper on some of these most common things. And again, our whole goal in doing this is that we just want to give you a background, a set of kind of commonly accepted, yes, you might run into this, because these are some of the more frequently seen aspects of a person who is on the spectrum. No one is the same as the next person. So I'm going to talk a little bit about these. So who wants to go ahead and take social skills?
I mean, before even jumping into social skills,
yeah,
I know Mike wanted to put a pin in it, but I mean, there's a certain aspect of like, no, like, yes, that is the DSM, that is, and it has a very medical model approach to describing what is going on. But we work with people, you know, we don't work with diagnoses. And so it's going to look very different. It's going to, I mean, and I'm sure at some point, like we're going to talk about it, but the idea of, well, you're not your diagnosis. Like you're greater than just what this one word says. Because for a lot of my clients, there's a very wide range of cognitive level and social skills level that we work with. And so it's like, oh, but I am autistic. Like, working in the ER, it was one of the things that I had to tell the clients coming in. I was like, you don't come into this ER saying you are the flu. But for whatever reason, we're okay with saying that with mental health. Yeah. And it's so when, you know, trying to create that distance, it's very hard when we're just using the definition that's given to us from the DSM. But I guess since I opened my fat mouth, I'll just jump right into social skills.
Real quick, I wanted to just say we work with people, not diagnoses. Well said,
yeah.
Love it.
So social emotional reciprocity, deficits, nonverbal communications. When it comes to social skills and social skills building, that is something that we focus a lot on with like how we explain what we're doing at GATE, mainly because of it makes it easier for us to communicate with parents, and it makes it easier for us to communicate with the case managers that are making the referrals. Social skills is a lot. Like we take for granted what we talk about. We take for granted what we do when in our everyday life. And I could sit down and create a list, and we've done this before, of like 50 different types of social skills that that you could learn, you can teach, and you can practice, and that's still not enough to just pick up on like social cues as well. And building up a person's social skills, it's learning where they are and where they can get to, and like try to work with them to get there, and create a network to help them get there with their parents, their teachers, their peers. It is social for a reason, and everything you build has to be built together.
Yeah, well, and you kind of touched on another aspect, and it's not just for, when you're working with or supporting someone, who's on the spectrum, but we're also talking about, just people in general, and any kind of other skill in general that we have, where no skill gets practiced or developed or even operates in isolation. All of these things will kind of careen and swirl in with each other. And we're going to go into a little bit more detail when we talk about communication, but I mean, it's one of the things about relationships where, we can face challenges because we maybe lack a social skill, but then that might create anxiety that comes out from that lack of being able to understand. Or Mike's going to talk about this with, something they call praxis. But going kind of a little bit deeper into the whole idea of nonverbal communication. Let's be very honest about communication, that it's all about communication. So who wants to go ahead and take this one? Tim, you want to take the slide?
So communication as nonverbal. So pretty much for us working in the office, we work with a lot of clients who are nonverbal, and we have to work around those barriers to try and bring out communication in a different way. So we use different tools such as like Roy's story cues. We use a pictorial system sometimes to try and bring that out. Sometimes it's body language. Sometimes it's a tone in the voice that they're using. It could come down to a lot of different ways that you can communicate. Communication isn't just verbal.
Yeah, the whole idea of communication, we normally assume that, this is the way that it's I say something, the person says something back. Well, actually, it's not the way it happens. The way communication works at its finest is, I think of something I want to communicate to James. Now, when I think about that in my mind, I have to think about what I want to say, the words I want to use to say it, but even further, I have to consider what James's frame of reference is. So I have to use words that I know maybe James is familiar with, or things that we've talked about in the past. Like, your brain takes all of this salad, and like tosses it in a bowl before you're serving it as that message to that other person. And then even further, your body language actually communicates a lot more. And we even know that because there's like facial acuity, and we talk about, facial recognition a lot when we talk about developing these skills for folks who are on the spectrum, because there are so many markers that our brain picks up on subconsciously. This is anything from, slight movements in the facial muscles, or it's the way that our shoulders are slumped, or it's the way that, and sometimes people use rules that aren't really rules, like, well, you have your arms crossed, so that means that, obviously you're angry or upset. Not necessarily. Maybe I'm bored and my arms are tired, so I kind of want to make a bed for my arms so they could just kind of rest. You know what I mean? But truthfully, 93% of all of our communication, whether it is body language, tone of voice, it is nonverbal. you know, or semi-verbal. So it's not exactly, you know, what we say, but how we say it. And communication is pretty much our most important survival skill for adults in the modern world, for anybody in the modern world, really. We can talk a little bit about mirror neurons and how, you know, our brain, that's actually one theory or one thing that's been postulated about what might be happening for folks who are on the spectrum, is that, you know, the mirror neurons, which is what kind of interprets and picks up on a lot of these things, like when you're a little baby and you cry in a certain tone and mom comes quicker than that other tone you tried. Those are part of mirror neurons, where we're like picking up on feedback that we get, like our brain's always taking in and digesting this information and synthesizing it to get better and remove danger and to feel safe and get our needs met, which is kind of at the core of any behavior, right? So with communication, I think this could kind of be a fun exercise here, where, you know.
Hold on a second before you go on.
Oh yeah, go ahead, dude.
Something important came up. Kat
Yeah.
mentioned verbal and nonverbal as a description. And
Sure.
that using words, whether it's through or gestures or pecks or things like that, they're still using words, which is
Yeah.
verbal. So she pointed out describing a non-vocal person, or something that we've got a big community down here in Atlanta that describes themselves as non-speaking or non-reliably speaking.
Yeah, I've also heard as non-traditionally communicative is one that I've often heard used. So no, excellent point, Mike.
And there's lots of different things that go into identity, how people see themselves, how they express themselves, how they understand other people. And these are discussions that we have panelists that we talk about all the time, that we need to be aware of how we're speaking about things, and that different groups have different language they prefer. So I appreciate you for sharing that. We always want to be aware and encouraging, supportive to whoever it is that we are interacting with. Like, once you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism.
Yeah.
So we want to be whoever the person is that we're dealing with. The things that they care about matter. The way that they identify matters. The things that are challenges to them, the things that are important for them matter. This is a presentation where we're covering a whole bunch of stuff, shotgun style, and trying to drill down. But yes, please continue with those comments, especially if there's anybody in the audience who is autistic on the spectrum, and you have insight you would like to share with us. We would love to have that as we continue to grow and expand our own way of understanding and supporting others.
To piggyback off of that real quick, working in the homes, I get the opportunity to see how not just the child communicates, but how the parents and grandparents communicate. And so what I will see has happened a couple of times is I'll go into a home and the family's like, oh, you know, my son never talks, or he's not listening, he's not communicating. And I'm like, no, it's the other way around. You're not paying attention to your child. And they'll look at me like if, you know, I smacked them in the face or something, and I'll look at them as if I didn't care. But because my response is, in the 30 minutes that I've been here, I've seen your child respond in English, Mandarin, sign language, and written. So like, there you can't. Let's say it's you don't see the sign language because you don't know that your child already knows that, and the in some cases that I work with, the child has very weak vocal cords, and so if you can't understand what they're saying, whichever language it's in, you're gonna think that they're not saying anything, and it's like, no, they need to practice building the strength in their throat in order to be able to communicate better.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, we actually, so my daughter is autistic. She's 6. And she was originally a foster placement that we adopted when she was 2. We've had her since she was about 15 months old. And when she came to us, she had underdeveloped throat musculature. And she had like severe neglect, so she didn't make any noises, she didn't cry, she didn't have any of those like mirror neuron type of things going on. So we had to teach her all of that. And her speech therapist had actually suggested very early on, let's do sign language, because she spent most of her time being very agitated and frustrated that she couldn't communicate anything to us, and that we didn't just, immediately fulfill whatever needs, because we didn't know what those needs were. So once she started learning sign language, her language capacity, her actual cognitive started to leap forward, because she was able to communicate those things, and less of her time was being spent being so frustrated about not being able to communicate anything, that she was able to spend more of her time now like picking up and internalizing what we were trying to teach her. She's gone from having no communication skills to 5 years later, we can't get her to shut up. It just keeps going.
No, and it's really, I mean, James, you were talking about the whole idea. I mean, behavior is communication. Everything that we do is communicating something, and it's more about us learning to be able to listen. Like there was one adult who's on the spectrum that I worked with when I was working with adults in the community, and this person had about 13 words in their repository for active description, and this person would go to the fridge and say tea, or they would point to the fridge and say tea, and staff would go and they would grab a bottle of tea, and shaking her head, no, tea. And staff would go back, and one time we were at a meeting and the staff's saying, I just don't understand what the hell's going on. She says tea and I give her tea and she doesn't want tea. And I'm like, just for a moment, let's look at it from her perspective. Maybe that's the word that she's learned to use, but in her perspective, her frame of mind is, dude, I pointed to the fridge, like I've told you what I wanted like 13 times now. What is wrong with you? Why don't you just get me the drink I want? And we eventually parlayed that in, like we said, like use of PECs and use of other kind of visuals to kind of give more tools for communication. But eventually it was, well, here's where all the things are. We can go get those things, because she had come from an environment where they provided everything to the person. So it was also about developing independence, but that communication could be a huge barrier to a lot of different opportunities. And, when we're talking about some of the, things that don't rely necessarily on words, we have so many different body language indicators about emotion and expression and feeling. And even these, we're not even, like Mike said, we're kind of shotgun approaching some of this information. We're not even touching on cultural implication. We're not even talking about environmental implication of a lot of these, because every culture, every subculture, every heritage, every environment develops its own set of rules and its own set of conditions of things that mean, like even the way you take or give money to an exchange of purchase can have huge implication depending on where you're from and what you've learned about what that is. So when Brian was saying about going into the home, not only learning the person that you're supporting, but the environment and how that environment communicates, highly, highly important, because you don't know what those things mean because you don't live there,
One of the craziest situations I've walked into, again, walking into the home, is that you have a grandmother who is mainly Spanish speaking, right? And her African American adopted children. So you go into this home and you have these kids who, one is very low verbal, the other one is a little bit higher, but they all know Spanish. So it's like, if you didn't know that ahead of time, it's throwing off the case managers, it's throwing off the ABAs, the BCBAs, because they're working with this kid and he's speaking to them in a language that they wasn't prepared for, because they didn't really know the case history, and everything going on before they walked into the home.
No, absolutely. And we're gonna kind of go through, because we don't want to spend a heavy amount of slides just because of the point of the presentation focusing on what autism is, because as we've said a number of times in different ways, autism is different for everyone, but we just want to give some context to some of what we're talking about, and because we're going to talk with more focus on how that might be impacted or triggered or set into either, you know, being successful or not successful through the playing of games, which is a heavy part of what we do therapeutically. So when we do even talk about, okay, we're using words, now we're going to go a little bit deeper and we're going to talk about intonation. So, you know, kind of each of us is going to take one of these phrases and we're going to say it with a particular intonation. So I didn't steal the money from her. Brian,
I didn't steal the money from her.
I didn't steal the money from her.
I didn't steal the money from her?
Steal the money from her.
I didn't steal the money from her. You know, each of those sentences that we
For the record,
said,
people, we didn't practice that at all.
no, could
Threw
you
that
tell?
at us like
And
right
it
now.
shows.
Had any rehearsal time for their sentence. We didn't know whose
No.
sentence was whose.
No,
Fast
I have
kid.
I have my
Don't
eyes
get away,
closed
that was
for most of it.
seamless. They didn't notice.
Yeah, no, I think but let's think about that example. And, you know, it was kind of part of the, let's throw a little bit of a ripple into it. So, you know, then there was kind of, we each had to then kind of read the next sentence, and we had to benefit in this exercise. So there actually is some intentionality to the way I sprung that on everybody. Ha ha, you fell into my little trap. But so you had to look at the sentence, and you actually all had the benefit of having the highlighted intention bolded for you with nice little asterisks around it. Sometimes in communication, the person that we may be speaking with, or the person that may be communicating to us, may not have that benefit, or that person may have challenges with identifying that. You know, you may have a person that speaks, quote unquote, very flatly. You know, the person that may just say, I didn't steal the money from her. We don't quite know where the intonation is. We don't know where the focus is. So we kind of can't interpret that. So when we're even talking about words and intonation and how we say things, and this is going to come up very heavily when we talk about, like, think about role-playing game sessions where you're speaking in character and you're speaking in nuance. What if the player that's at your table, and I'm sure that there are plenty of good stories there, what if that player does not pick up on that nuance? What if that player is new to role-playing and you're trying to express that importance of how to play in character? All of these things are not necessarily problems. Okay, that's the big thing that we're kind of looping through the whole presentation. These are opportunities to get to know a person. These are opportunities to get to learn how to interact with that person and to help that person's interaction be more successful and engaging. It's a very basic human need to be heard. And if we are not heard, yeah, go ahead, James.
Well, I was just going to say, I also want to tack on that it's also a great opportunity to expand one's own understanding and be able to incorporate new ideas, like new situations that you may not have thought of before that take place now, you know, that you hadn't encountered, and now you're exposed to them, so you get experience, and experience being the great teacher and motivator that it is.
Yep.
That's a lot of what it takes.
Absolutely. So the importance really when we talk about this is relationships, because when we're talking about social skills and communication and all these things that really are the underpinning, you know, we talk about a very valuable tool when we're supporting people on the spectrum being social skills or social stories. So, you know, we talk about how one of the number one difficulties for someone on the spectrum is the isolation that person feels as a result of the diagnosis, not the diagnosis itself. So it's the fact that other people who maybe don't understand, or the people who don't have a frame of reference, might isolate that person just because they're maybe afraid of saying the wrong thing, or that person may isolate themselves because of some other social connection that did not go successfully. So now it's this, you know, fear kind of built on. And so our goal our overarching goal, and we're going to talk about some other behaviors and how those might play in, because I know, Mike, I really want to hear you talk about praxis. And, when we talk about a lot of this stuff is inclusivity. That's our goal. We want to make sure that people can be included in this activity, because we found that play is a very basic psychological need. That need to play. I mean, my favorite video clip is that one of the crane picking up a golf ball and bouncing it off of the pavement and just jumping around with such glee at the bounce, as it goes towards the heavens. Like, play is essential. It's one of our big definers. So, Mike, do you want to kind of talk into that, and then we'll go into the next slide, speaking about repetitive stuff?
Sure. And thinking about the isolation and loneliness, I had a camp this week where it was middle school kids on the spectrum. And at the end of the week, one of them said, "This isn't what I expected." I'm like, "What were you expecting?" He said, "Well, usually when mom sends me to a camp, it's where we go and talk about all the things I do wrong." That was crushing. But the good thing was being there and playing games and having that natural environment experience and focusing on assets and affinities and strengths and all that good stuff was a welcome surprise. And the kid grew a lot and learned a lot and felt good about it.
Yeah, that the power of play, right? It's one of the reasons we all do this.
Yeah. What was that? When children are free to play, they play naturally at their ever advancing edges of their mental, physical, and I would add emotional abilities. It's Peter Gray who said that, and he's got a great TED Talk or two if you guys want to check those out on the importance of play.
Right.
So when we're talking about restrictive and repetitive behaviors, for me, we're going to dig. This is just the intro to praxis, right? So I don't go too deep here.
Well, this is the one which has the info. So, I mean, I think the importance of praxis and, this planning to everything that we're talking about with, because we're going to dovetail it into gaming. So, go ahead and tell us about praxis, man.
Yeah. So praxis is just having an idea and then being able to execute that idea. And if you think of development, like from Piaget's perspective, sensory motor is an early stage. So a thought is actually movement. I want to grab something or reach for something, and that's the thought. And there's concrete proof there, concrete evidence of, is my idea and my plan working? I can see, does my hand move? Does it pick up what I want or not? And a lot of what praxis is things can break down along the way. Maybe you have trouble with the idea. Maybe there are multiple steps and you don't know what they are, or you're not aware of the right sequence. So at any point, things can break down and you have to adapt your plan. One of the ideas behind autism is that it is a praxis issue, and because early on sensory input, how we experience the world, can be aversive. So if I'm experiencing something that's aversive, I'm going to withdraw from that, and I'm going to do things that help make me feel safe, make me feel connected. And so those stereotyped behaviors, people call stimming, could be for self-soothing. I'm overwhelmed, I'm scared, so I'm distracted, I can't handle this. Here's something that makes me feel better. Same thing with the insistence on sameness and flexibility, adherence to routines. And again, somebody pointed out in the chat, these aren't just autism traits. I like things to be a certain way.
Yeah.
It's because all of us are pattern recognizers. And when we see something that doesn't fit a pattern, our brain says could be a threat. Pay attention.
Yeah.
If our brain recognizes the pattern, we habituate to it. Brain says, okay, we can ignore that. And I think that's how we get a lot of things like racism. We see patterns. That doesn't match a pattern. I'm not familiar with that. I'm scared. Then hopefully we have experiences and we, kind of bring all this stuff in and we go, oh, wait, it's a bigger pattern and I can understand this and it's okay. But when a kid needs to control the story or needs to control what's happening, when I want to insist on, please, can we just do it this way? It's because I'm not sure what will happen if I'm not in control. Control is safety and predictability.
Well, and let's think in that context, Mike, and anybody can jump in on this, but what about that classic example of, in a role-playing game setting where people talk about, oh my God, I got a rules lawyer at my table. Think about that behavior in the context of what we're talking about. What might a rules lawyer be thinking or doing? Like, what's the goal behind that behavior? As we
Right,
said,
they have the set of rules memorized, so they know exactly how things are supposed to portray. You go from A to B to C to D, and there's no fluctuation because they are a set of rules. And then the GM, like myself, I'm story, not details. I throw rules out of the window all the time, because they don't apply to a situation. But somebody with this type of demeanor might panic in that situation because it doesn't fit that ABCD structure. I actually, in the time that I have known Mike and we have continued to talk, we have never talked about the fact that my daughter is praxic, and actually has some of those issues with her motor planning and verbal planning. She does much better with words that have more syllables than she does with shorter words, because when she plans them, she can plan the entire word, and then she knows how to say the entire word. So she'll say motorcycle with complete, perfect pronunciation. But then apple, she'll shorten, or she'll say apple. Like she'll drop the end of the word because she only planned the beginning of it, because it only went so far to where she recognized, okay, I now know how to say the word apple. I'm going to say the word apple. But the planning didn't go far enough to hit the whole word, just trying to shorten it as much as possible. The longer or more detailed something has to be, in my experience, and Mike, you can tell me if this is something that's been, kind of along the way, just common, the longer or more detailed something is, the better somebody that is praxic is able to pick it up, just because of the amount of detail and what they have to focus on.
Sure, and it can be, I've worked with individuals who have whole scripts memorized. I work with a kid who's an actor, but his praxis is terrible. How does that work? It's because there's a script.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to plan anything, it's all there.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you want to do improv stuff, you take away the structure, and that can be terrifying. It's like, this is the foundation of my whole understanding of the world. I need this to feel safe. But that starts in physical, sensory motor, our bodies. That's how we learn to plan stuff. We have an idea, we can see it happen. And then we get to this stage where things are abstract. They're ideas, symbols in our head. I can't see if it's going to work. It's just nonsense up under the hat where there's nothing, clearly. So that can be really frustrating because you can't see. And dealing with facts, numbers, letters, puzzles, things that are, static, constant, those things are predictable. Emotions are messy and ugly. Getting into the feelings stuff can be really scary. So this, for me, is a lot of what's underneath everything. And like I said, this also, I think, applies to everybody. There's something that if you're stressed or scared, you need control. There's a way that you want things to be because that helps you feel safe. So I kind of approach everything from that angle. So this the foundation for going forward for me in this thing.
Oh, Matt, go ahead.
One of the things we've seen with regarding rules lawyering is we tend to stay very rules light with the games that we use, but it could be not necessarily the person is, oh, these are the rules, we have to follow these rules. It's these are the expectations.
Yeah.
And then that becomes a rule to them. Even though the rest of the table doesn't know it, and then it's like, okay, how do we navigate that where this is what you expect it to be versus this is what you want to be, and this is what you need to be in order to feel calm in this situation. And the child in that moment, anyone in that moment, isn't really going to see those kinds of differences. And so it's with especially those first couple months for us. We had our clients were a lot more aggressive. So it was like trying to de-escalate as soon as we see a problem like that. But that's something that we couldn't plan for because we didn't know, because that's the first time the child expressed that.
Yeah. And as we go through, because again, we're not going to spend a whole ton, and we want to get kind of to the game, but we wanted to give you kind of an underpinning of some of the challenges that might result, because there's also a lot of strengths that we see. And again, these are not every single person who is on the spectrum has all of these, but these are a lot of traits that we have noticed, and you know, that people who are on the spectrum will describe themselves as having, which can be tremendous benefit. And again, they're phrased kind of, you know, generically to a way, because sometimes a person may or may not have this, and we don't know that for sure. But the complete underpinning to this is no one person who is on the spectrum acts or responds exactly the same. And let's even go back again to that kind of well that we've dove into a couple of times already, you know, of just even thinking this is not just relegated to autism. This is, there are, and again, we're all gamers, so we've had that night where the dice, clearly we did something to their family. Like, those dice hate us. So we're not telling a very fun story, or the story is not very fun for us because dice are not going our way that night. That can rapidly change the level of interaction, the level of fun a person's having around the table. So, you know, one of the other things that we're going to say later on in the presentation, but we'll say it now as well, it's not always about autism. And we shouldn't automatically make that leap when we're assessing a situation where we're talking about, you know, what someone is going through that day. Man, I wake up on the wrong side of the floor some days as well. And some days I just ain't in the space for it. So one of the things that we'll talk about kind of going through, because we've already kind of talked about the root of certain behavior, is how to tell if somebody in your game has an autism spectrum disorder. Well, guess what? You can't. Until that person, unless he or she or they tell you. You don't know. And they're not required to tell you. There's no game law that, you know, to have at this table, you need to tell me what all your diagnoses are. But that's not a problem, because the way that you treat someone who is on the spectrum should be no different from how you treat someone who is neurotypical. There should be no difference as with anyone else. And one of the guidelines and one of the things we want to always remember is we want to be respectful, we want to be compassionate, and we want to be kind. So I know either Brian or Tim, or, you know, I know, Mike, you had an interesting flamethrower story. So sometimes some of these behaviors, especially if we don't have an underpinning to them, especially if we don't have an understanding as to, you know, and I think I said in one of the panels yesterday, we have to exercise our why muscle. And this is not just from a clinician standpoint, but this is also from a human standpoint. We need to understand that when something is happening, we know the what. But to help understand and be inclusive and accommodating, we need to understand as much as we can the why. But there are some good global rules about managing conflict, because let's be honest, having any sort of condition is never an excuse for behavior, especially if it might endanger the health and safety of that person or another. But we have to be careful about the way that we explore this. So Brian, I know that you just said moments ago that you work with some folks who are pretty aggressive. So I'd like to hear like your experience with some of these, if you guys want to talk about some of that.
As far as like aggression, like during session or at the table, like
yeah, just like how to manage conflict and why these are some good rules and maybe some situations you've dealt with.
So I would say first, first is a lot of the beginning clients we had were clients that we were trying to see were able to have a step down from intensive in-home to intensive in community. And the difference is we were going to take from doing just working one-on-one to working in groups. So myself and Dr. James had been working with some of our clients in their homes, and we already knew what could kind of trigger them to become aggressive or violent. Luckily, most of that was connected to problems uniquely found in the home, but that doesn't necessarily mean we could take it for granted in the office. So it was, a lot of it was having a series of just backup plans. We're in this situation and I already see that, and we talked about this in a previous panel. I know that when he's talking about this, it's actually something else. It's like,
Right.
you know, so maybe the assistant in the room thinks that, oh, you know, he's just being cute and everything like that. Like, no, he's, you know, there's a reason why he is the most violent, you know, person I've ever worked with, you know? and,
Right.
and so, and I'm not saying that to make fun of him at all. I'm saying that because, like, this was a case that I stuck through the situation. Even I had a knife thrown at me. Like, you know, it was that level of violence. So to know that, like, with some of our clients, is that pencil is a weapon. Whether or not you think that is doesn't necessarily mean he thinks that is.
Yeah.
So it's setting up safety. And if you have that time to see what was escalating, how do you de-escalate it? We had one table where we were role playing, and another table where you could just go and work on a puzzle and just relax doing something visual. We noticed pretty early on that any visual processing that we were doing with our clients would reduce like some of the violence and some of the like OCD like tendencies. And so that's why games like The Quiet Year really worked for us, because we were doing a game where you're telling the story together and you're drawing at the same time. And so we started to incorporate that with some of our other games. It wasn't, oh, why are you doing that? You're not paying attention. No, this is something that this child is doing to keep you safe. You may not understand that, but that's what's going on. And so we keep our groups small, mainly because of the way the state has the coding set up for us to do those groups. So 2 to 3 people in a group per licensed clinician, but we aim to have it like a clinician and an assistant, because, you know, I hope, like, was there anything else with that you would want me to touch on? Because I know we're trying to.
No, I mean, I would say in general that you actually kind of indicated not only this slide, but the next slide, because I really like that we're getting into some like real world examples. So I kind of want to not accelerate us, but, you know, push us forward a little so you can also take some time for the questions in the group. I mean, in general, you touched about a lot of the fact that, you know, aggression, you know, earlier we said behavior is communication. So if I'm hitting you, I'm telling you something. I'm telling you I'm not enjoying what we're doing. I'm telling you I want to stop what we're doing, or I'm telling you I don't like you, or I'm saying I want to get out of this situation. And it might be, it's too cold in here. It's too hot in here. It's too noisy in here. So that behavior is communication. So remaining calm, listening without judgment, all of these things are pretty much not unique to autism. These are things, I mean, I'm a certified crisis management trainer in 3 different systems of crisis de-escalation and management. So these are global rules, and it reverberates back to understanding why the person acts that way. And, you know, again, these are common triggers, but these are not things that are found to anybody or everybody. And it's only the goal of understanding why the person is engaged in this behavior. So as we go through, and we're going to hit the game slide in a second, so I'm sorry guys and crowd if I'm rushing to, but inclusivity is important, but safety is also important. Understandably, we know, I mean, we are trained professionals. I have been punched, kicked, bit, spat upon. I've had all manner of bodily fluid thrown upon me. I'm trained to deal with that. And if we're talking about a game store environment, there are certain rules that, you know, maybe you as a patron or you as a game store owner, if we have any in the audience, you're not a trained behavioral specialist. But there are still some rules that you can apply, because yes, having a condition tells me why you're doing it, but there still needs to have the you know, we need to understand that some behaviors are not acceptable and not okay, but it's part of us to teach why they're not okay. And to do that, we have to understand and make changes as we can to understand where that person's coming from so we can diffuse a possible situation. So as always, be respectful, be compassionate, be kind. That's kind of the thread through the procedure of the panel. So let's think about your game. And I mean, this is a general slide where, you know, it's not story time with Uncle Jack. I don't have to read every little bullet for everybody. But when we talk about stuff, you know, is there a difference, you know, Mike, James, anybody, about how you discuss rules? How could that be an impact? Any stories?
Yeah, so one of the things that I do with our groups, with Bodhana, and we do have 2 groups where we're running that deal with individuals with autism diagnoses. So I create, for a new game, I create cheat sheets that have all of the common rules for the game already listed with an explanation. Like when I say to you, roll X thing, this is what you need to do. When we run Savage Worlds, I had an explanation of the Benny system. And, you know, if they spend a penny, these are the list of things that you can do with that penny. So, and honestly, like part of it was because then I didn't have to keep looking it up in case I forgot something too. But to give the players a cheat sheet or something to work off of. I also don't overload them with a bunch of rules before we start playing. They need to know the basics of how to get into the game. They don't need to know how combat runs because we're not in combat. Once we get into a combat scenario, or once we get into, you know, a social skills challenge or something else like that, we can go through the rules for those things as they happen. Again, I found most of them are experiential learners. They experience something and they're able to pick it up as they go through the process of doing it. So I don't overload them with a bunch of rules in the beginning. I give them the basics of what they need to know. I give them a cheat sheet to work off of while we're playing. And it's also helpful to have the 2 facilitator system that we use, because the second facilitator is also there, that if somebody has a question, that facilitator can go over, like while I'm still running for the rest of the group, and kind of answer those questions one-on-one, because some folks are very conscious of interrupting a game or being that distraction, you know, and they don't want to say anything because they don't want to interrupt the group. We have an individual in one of our groups that actually waited until everybody else left our Google Hangouts meeting for one of our groups, because he had questions about his character, but didn't want to ask them with the rest of the group there because he was conscious about it. And he didn't even say to us that he was waiting to talk to us. He just very quietly sat there while everybody kind of dumped out of the meeting, and then he was left, and we were like, hey buddy, you got questions about something? So I try to, rules can be very heavy. So I try to go rules light in the beginning and then fill in the gaps as we go, so that people can learn, and give them the, you know, whatever written rules or other things that I can give them ahead of time, so that they have a reference point that they can continue to look at.
And that's something that's very easily transferable, because again, we're talking a lot about your friendly local game store in this. So in your game, have a co-GM that maybe doesn't necessarily have to take over the story, but have another person that can act as that secondary, like, hey, if anybody has questions and I'm in the middle of this group, you feel free to ask Jerry. Jerry can answer some questions for you, because we can't eliminate all of the challenges that a person might have, and we can't always know those things, but sometimes just providing that support, that release valve, or that exit strategy from that, you know?
I've also had, with the 2GM system, I've had some success of, this wasn't a therapeutic game, but in a game with 2GMs that we ran, so that the players were not confused, we had stock photos printed up of a bunch of the NPCs. And then as we were acting as characters, we would hold up next to us the face of the person that we were playing as, so that our voice did not become confusing as to who we were portraying. And I've tried like limited bits of that during gameplay when we were at a table. It's more difficult to do it, you know, in this format, but being at the table, like being able to hold up pictures that, you know, your players associate with certain characters, makes it very easy to slide in and out of those roles. And then, you know, you can do like a surprise reveal. Like oh my God, we haven't seen Old Man Winters for 7 sessions. He's back. What is he doing? You know, like, and you don't have to do this grand thing. You just hold up Old Man Winters, and they're like, holy crap, there he is. So, you know, just there's a lot of creative ways to be able to use like a 2GM system.
We do a very similar thing in the office. I'm usually running the game, but what happened is the co-facilitator would be playing the game as a player and more as a guide than a player. So they are helping facilitate in the sense that if someone needs help, they're there to guide them through that.
Sitting alongside,
Yep.
you know, like especially when we were mixing our groups where, like, you know, you have my clients that I have been working with for over a year. So in one case it was like 3 or 4 years, and then Dr. James and the kids that he's been working with for a couple years. So it's like, no, that person knows you. Sit next to that person.
Yeah.
You know, I you know, and or, you know, as we've had a similar situation. Dr. James comes. He's like, hey, I got somebody for group. And I sit next to that person because his kid doesn't like him. So, like, you know, we've had that happen too. But one of the other things that we do a little bit differently is we look for games to build upon, to teach rules.
Yes.
So we might start with this one game because it's the simplest version of what we're building towards. Or if you look at Crossmasters Arena, where it has like the tutorial is a series of smaller games that you play until you learn everything. You know, so
it's like scaling to learn rules, right? So like we start at, maybe we're gonna play the Quiet Year to learn how to tell a story of the overarching like world without being a character. How do we tell that story? And then we'll move to For the Queen, and we'll teach how to tell your story and how everyone's story is connected to one character. And then we'll progress like that and start to introduce new mechanics and new tools to lead up to being able to role play.
And again, with the FLGS panache, because we have another slide where we examine more of the environment of the gaming store itself, but something as simple as you're in a game store and you're teaching a game, and we kind of jokingly, I could say the word Monopoly and everybody goes, oh, you know, in their head. But one of the reasons Monopoly sometimes is so frustrating to some people, besides the development of the game itself, is the issue of house rules and how you explain house rules, or even how you explain that game. I mean, I've been taught so many board games over the years, and everybody's probably familiar with this phrase of, oh, okay, oh yeah, you know, you should have done this. And I go, well, you didn't tell me I could do that at the beginning of the game. Well, you know, you learn through playing. Sometimes that experience can be frustrating. I mean, think about some games, about how complex they can be. And let's just really think of how we're teaching that game and how we're facilitating that game, and allowing time for people to take their turns, you know, looking at, you know, what to do if someone tells, you know, maybe I'm just being helpful, telling you how to take your turn. I'm not trying to, you know, be backseat player on you. Maybe I think I have a great strategy. I want to share that with you. That's a situation you should talk about. I mean, there's also something to be said for session 0 for board games as well. So, Mike, did you have anything to throw in on there before I went to the next slide? I think you're managing the chat there partially for us.
No, you guys have covered that all really well.
All right. So briefly about the game store. So we talked a little bit about things like physical environment. You know, just think of your friendly local game store if you're kind of lucky enough to have one. Hardwood floors or carpet. That could make a huge difference. Large open ceilings versus tight down ceilings. Is it dark? Is it very light? Where is it located in terms of the neighborhood? Is it next to the train tracks? Is it near the airport? You know, those might be uncomfortable environments for a person that might cause a behavior to occur. And you don't necessarily know, like I don't come to the table and go, yeah, just to let everybody know at the table before we start playing, you know, Gloomhaven, I don't like spiders. I have a fear of large dogs, and I really don't like thunderstorms. Okay, let's go play. You know, that's not how people engage at the table. So thinking about that local game store, you might also have an empty store on Tuesday afternoon and a busy store at Friday Night Magic. Special events, kids versus adult crowds might be a triggering element for someone. And some of this we already know that gaming can be a helpful activity. This is something we've talked about in many, many different panels. And we don't just mean in a clinical aspect. For example, the picture that you see here, if you haven't been introduced this picture before in our panels from Bodhana this week, this is a monthly board game club, is what we call it, and it's run for a local agency called the Tommy Foundation, which provides support to families and persons experiencing autism. And one of the things that we do is we just go to a local game store, we get the use of their library, and we just play games on a Saturday. That's all we do. We don't sit there and say, okay, gang, today we're going to work on reciprocal communication, so everyone needs 15 volleys while we play Catan. No, it's let's maybe try a new game today, or maybe try a game with a new person today, or let's learn a new game, which, it sometimes can test frustration tolerance and learning the rules and dealing with a rules, problem. There are so many. Go ahead, James.
I'm sorry. We had one of our groups, and had we not had them playing together for a little bit, we probably would not have done this experiment. But to kind of socialize them and get them to realize that like these like friendly local game stores are not places to be avoided. We have held some of our group sessions physically at one of the stores in our community. And, the owner knows when we're coming, and we gave the kids some time to go in and kind of walk around the store, learn their environment, take a look at the shelves. Holy crap, I've never seen so many games in my natural life. Like, and then sit down at the tables, and they all socialize before we started playing. And then Jack and I had come up with the idea that we were going to run a session that was going to be real time. And it was the session itself was going to be taking place over the 2 hours, but those 2 hours were real time in the game.
Yeah.
And to continue to work on their resiliency and their ability to, manage themselves in stressful situations, we created a bunch of puzzles. Some of them were actual physical puzzles that we took other board games and made puzzles out of them. And we had one of those slide puzzles with the different colors on it that they had to arrange and do we're horrible people. But then when they tackled these puzzles at the beginning of the session, they were in a wizard's cave. So when they entered, we didn't tell them that it was a teleportation chamber. So all of the kids had to randomly roll a die, and the first 5 that rolled odds ended up in the same group together. And exactly what we wanted to have happen happened, which was the kids that have kind of fallen into their own sort of clique, or the people that they've been playing with, were now mixed up and playing with other people that were in the group. They were physically aware of these people. They hadn't played with all of them before. So they were in a new environment, in a specifically timed scenario, that they had 2 hours to solve puzzles with new people that they hadn't played with before, and be able to meet their goal by the end of it.
Yeah, and
they pulled it off.
Yeah, definitely.
They did it. And at the end of the session, Jack and I had our hee moment, because we were cleaning up, and one of the players sitting at the table packing up his stuff said, "I know what you guys are doing." Jack and I were like, we're cleaning up, buddy. We're good. What are we doing? No, I know what you were doing in the game. What? We ran a game for it because Jack and I are playing stupid, and the kid goes, "You were trying to get us to respond to different situations and under different levels of stress." And I was like, man, that'd be really cool if that's what we were doing.
Yeah. And one of the other big kind of things to that experience also, and folks are like, "Oh my God, you can't run in a game store. That's a HIPAA thing." And I go, no. First of all, we only talk to people in character name. That's one of the things. And we don't step in and go, "Hey, everybody, this is the group from blah, 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 and everybody has, autism." No, we don't do that.
Dotson, we've got Dotson here.
Yeah, no,
Nobody cares.
We did that specifically because we want to also utilize the fact that, you know, friendly local game stores, you know, if we could fly colors like biker clubs at these places, everybody has their store and it's a nice respite for people. And we also want to provide that. Remember, we talked earlier about isolation and we talked about lack of social connection. The friendly local game store, now we've taught you how to play D&D. We've taught you how to play Kids on Bikes. You have your own rule book, because that's one of the things that we try to provide in all of our groups. So now you can go to Thursday Night Adventures League. You can go to Pathfinder Society Play, and you know something now. Like, you have a form of communication to engage people and develop natural supports, and you know what to talk about with those people, and you know how to role play, and you know the rules. So we're setting up comfort that will provide. So, I mean, there is some therapeutic benefit to it, but also let's look at that environment being a respite just for us. So let's provide more opportunity by being inclusive. Go ahead, Brian, while I switch our slide.
With the intensive and community model, part of the goal is get them into the community. Like,
Yeah.
that is like, if I'm like, intensive in community, intensive in home is like a step in between residential and office, right? But the idea is to create like a wraparound approach where you have the community, you have all these other factors that they can rely on when you step down or you step out. And I know people are concerned about like HIPAA issues and whether or not, look, I work with my families. I tell them, look, if I see you outside of like sessions, I probably won't even say hi to you. You might get a nod, but I'm not going to start up a conversation with you, because I don't want us to get into a situation where we're talking about something that is personal to you in a public environment. So when we're working with our groups, or when I'm working with individuals in the community, I'm in the community with you. If I see people walking around us, I'm probably going to change the subject, or I'm going to focus on something else. On more than one occasion, I was somebody's uncle, like, or somebody's like friend or something. He's like, "Oh, this is my friend." I was like, "Oh, okay. Are you guys related?" I don't know. Maybe I am. My hair is dark. His hair is dark. You roll the dice. Let's see.
Yeah, you're like, we went to different schools together. Meep meep.
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
you're at another. You're like, who was that masked man? I don't know.
Smoke bombs all day.
So before we go to the chat and get kind of final thoughts, here's just some general rules that we want you to be aware of. So one, be consistent, whether it's in your game or at your table. Discuss rules and expectations before playing. If you're a game store owner, hey, I think it's great when Dave comes in every week and drops $1,000 on whatever minis games he's playing at the time. But if you have a rule in the store that says no swearing, Dave doesn't get to swear. You have to make sure that if you're going to apply a rule to your environment, if you're going to make it that way, you want to make that rule consistent. A lot of times the people who have the most challenges or may have the most, we talk about behavior being disruptive, disturbing, or destructive. People with the most extreme behaviors usually kind of get singled out because theirs are the most obvious. So we always have to remember to, be consistent when we apply rules, identify things early. Don't assume those difficulties are related automatically to autism. Just everyone has a bad day. And the more that we make these environments inclusive by having rules and providing quiet areas if we can, respecting others' needs for space, we're going to be able to be excellent to each other as Bill and Ted have taught us so many years ago. And we'll review those teachings. But again, just to make time for discussion and chat, here's my references page. We're going to go to questions and, please seek us out. We're going to probably put links to Bodhana and all of our resources. And, Tim, Mike, Brian, feel free to drop links into the chat as well. All of us are accessible for all manner of advice, questions, consultation and such. We're all wonderful folks who love talking about this clearly. So let's go ahead and bring it back down and visit some of the chat. So what are some questions that we've missed out on here?
Well, the cool thing too, I want to say about all of that stuff that we were going through about how you support somebody, that's all about creating a safe environment to facilitate praxis. You can make mistakes, you can take risks, and you can learn how things work. You can pick up on those patterns that you would have missed before. And make those connections. And so that translates into a vast array of skills, but not just that, but like a story that was shared in chat, stuff that can really contribute to self-image and self-worth, being successful, doing something well, and feeling good about yourself, being proud, instead of having somebody focus on or tell you you're defined by your challenges or weaknesses or problems.
Yeah. So
Jack, I got to tell you, this is a super fun panel, because as we've been discussing this, and all of us have been kind of bouncing back and forth with it, we have also been having an entirely related discussion on chat. There really aren't questions. We've just been talking to each other on that too.
oh, really?
Yeah. Jack,
Wow.
were you not included in any of this?
No, I am focused on like.
Jack doesn't pay attention to words.
It's okay, Jack.
It's aw.
It's okay. Go ahead. Write something to the chat, Jack.
I did. I put some of the things in. Okay, we do have a question. How do you decide what game to play? It really it's going to depend. There's kind of a lot of factors that go into selection of a game specifically for the therapeutic purpose.
Therapeutic.
Go ahead.
Nice.
The therapeutic purpose of it really depends on what our clients want to get out of the game, or what it is that they're looking to work on, because that informs what sort of story we tell them, and then story will very often dictate what system or what game. We can set most stories to pretty much any genre that you want. But it kind of comes down to what the clients want to work on. Like Mike just put there, their interests and affinities are 100% in that. If people are not into sci-fi, I'm not going to run a Firefly game for them, like that, because none of them are gonna grasp, they're not going to hold on to that.
I was going to say that. Go ahead, James. I'm sorry. We're constantly.
Wait, if you guys are going to keep cutting each other off.
I'm sorry. I'm experiencing my Hugh Grants right now. I'm sorry.
A lot of our clients in one of our groups were very interested in horror. They were all horror fans, and we were kind of talking about like, well, how do we run a therapeutic horror game? And I went, guys, oh, that's so easy.
How do you not? Like, give me the Cthulhu's.
So we ended up settling on Deadlands. The Deadlands system, because of the idea of a fear aura encompassing one area, and through actions being able to raise or lower said fear level. The facilitator was very excited about the chance for their kids to work on crisis management, and having the natural consequences of their decisions sort of inform how much better or worse a situation was made, just based on how they're acting around other people and how their actions inform other people. So I'm currently running a horror game in Deadlands that's been going for 3 or 4 months. I've scared the pants off of them at least half a dozen times. We've had some seriously, very emotionally charged moments. We've had some very heavy moments. We've done 3 sessions now where one of the characters is actually playing through and portraying PTSD and forms of trauma. Their character was part of a cave-in in the character's history, and that character lost his daughter. And unbeknownst to the character, I put them in a cave-in situation. And that character has been playing through the trauma that their character experienced, but now developing that empathy with, playing through trauma through their eyes and how they would understand somebody else dealing with that situation. And he has been doing a truly spectacular job of everybody has, of staying in character and staying relevant to the moment and playing through everything. But to come back around to your question, the needs of the clients are really the first thing that I think we probably would consider, and then what type of story informed on that, and then what type of system informed on what type of story. So we have like a tiered
Well,
process.
what we do is part of our initial intake is a play assessment. And we, because we're using an alt-play model, we use like the inventories and assessments associated with that. And I do make part of the biopsychosocial assessment. I do ask the child, what do you do for fun? What do you do that creates flow? And what do you do together with your family for fun? Like to get like an idea of what the differences are. With some of our clients, we will start with like a modified, like if Blockist doesn't work, if Blockist Duo does not work, like if I cannot get you to sit down with that, I will like take a step down from that and try to do like jigsaw puzzles and do like we talked about before. I just strip Carcassonne for its parts and make it into a giant jigsaw puzzle. Like, and I'm looking to see if you're like, and this ties to their play style, if you're willing to even sit down for more than 4, 5, 10 minutes, if you cannot do that, well, we're going to do a lot of walking and talking, because, you know, we're going to, if you have like a bunch of physical energy, whatever we do, we'll probably include that as well. And then as far as role-playing games is concerned, we get a sense, like you said before, what you're interested in. And as we are like trying different games, we're getting a sense of what kind of rules will be most fit, what kind of rules, what kind of settings. And so we'll go with Tim, was it Tiny Dungeon? I think Tiny Dungeon is one. Lasers and Feelings. We'll go rules light and then go heavier as we see what they're interested in.
Yeah, and I mean, we had a panel yesterday where we talked specifically about, like, you know, selecting certain systems based upon either their mechanics or their theme, because there was a question addressed here about, you know, games recommended for like sexual trauma and things of that nature. And you really kind of want to be careful, because a lot of, specifically with, because I've done a lot of work over the last 20 years working on sexual abuse and trauma resultant from that. And I mean, there are games that are very pointed. There's like Bluebeard's Bride is a game that very directly deals with it, with the facets of abuse, and specifically, you know, sexual and physical abuse. There is 10 Candles, which could be a very serious adult themed game. I mean, the idea with the game, I won't say that it's secondary, because certain systems do it easier than others or more readily because of the way that the theme of the setting has been designed. But you really want to make sure overall of what your goal is through that trauma treatment. So if the goal is disclosure and opening up, you might want to have something very rules light. Some people have expressed, I mean, one of our board members is Rich Thomas from Onyx Path, who is formerly creative director of White Wolf. So, you know, folks have sent many letters over the years about how fighting the monsters in the World of Darkness setting was very akin to them fighting the monsters and the demons inside. So, you know, one of the things that we found with is, you know, the player, especially if they're going with something deeply or very personally emotional, they're going to connect as much as they are comfortable or willing for that experience to their role playing. And part of the job is knowing what the purpose of that is and just being there to provide support as you're going through that journey. Because it's that thing that we talk about a lot in trauma therapy, where there are some people on one side who say that you want to push a little. You want to kind of, no, we can open up about this. It's okay. There are other people who say you never push. And that's a very bitter battle, but I think it has relevance to gaming in that when you're talking about abuse and trauma specifically, you always want to be careful, not only because of that player, but also because of the other players. Like, let's say you have a trauma recovery group that's using gaming. You have to really do a lot of consent mechanic work and a lot of session. Like, I would even say you have a session 0, you have a session 0.25, you have a session 0.50, 0.75 before you even touch dice. And that's about establishing all of the safety, all of the ground rules, because you don't necessarily know, what a person is comfortable telling you initially, let alone what might happen at the table. And bear in mind, even now with, you know, COVID and telehealth and the way we're talking about this, I can't pull someone aside in the middle of a session where something emotionally tight and deep has come up. you know, because you know, we had a situation in one of our games, not directly related, but I think you'll catch the point, where we were talking through, one of the persons who was playing around the table had a history of suicidal ideation. And while we were going through the session, the person started to have an emotional reaction. So afterwards, it was like, hey, can I talk to you? And I literally, like, I was like, hey, I'm just letting you know, because I'm not going to lie to you. I have to talk to your mom. Like, I have to contact your mom because you're having this moment upstairs and she may not know. And I was like, just please stay on camera with me. And I was so terrified as a practitioner that I was like, what if this person shuts their camera down? I have no idea what the hell's going on. So I say that in environments like that, I mean, it's easy to provide that type of emotional support. And let's think even further with people who may not be as emotionally readily connected through an online facet. I mean, that's just one stroke of the brush of what we're currently working within. So again, it's more, I think it's less about the game for that question. And it's more about, because you can tell any story in an RPG, right? So I can tell that in a horror game. I could tell that in a sci-fi game where, you know, maybe we talk about domestic abuse by witnessing domestic abuse. So it's not happening to your character, but what would your character do to respond to it? I think it's more about your environment of safety and your environment of support that is going to be very different within the gaming environment. It's very easily to be supportive in group hug, so to speak, if you're in a room with folks when someone's having a traumatic reaction or an intrusive memory or something of that sort. So I think that it's far more important to discuss how we're going to support each other. And that's actually, you know, very similar to anxiety or depression treatment. How are you going to handle when someone's up here and we started down here? You know, so that if that answers the question, I think that that's a much more important facet of that to be able to identify and go into. Man, I feel bad. We're going to have to jump off soon. Oh my gosh. Go ahead, Brian.
Especially with what you just said, very relevant to what's going on with COVID right now. And a lot of us are being thrown into telemental health. You need a ton of safety mechanisms. And do not be afraid to have it in your consent form, to have it in your paperwork, that if we do not have a backup plan in case of an emergency, I cannot see you.
Yeah, emergency contact is part of our intake. If I don't have that form, I can't treat you.
I have to be allowed to communicate with them and under what circumstances. Be very transparent under when that would happen, why that would happen, and how. Yeah. And have a backup means of communicating also.
Yep.
So, for example, we take for granted that we're doing this online. We have the video. If our internet crashes right now, you have it part of your treatment plan to, I'm going to call you right now just to make sure you're okay. We can end the session here, but I want to make sure everything's all right. I think that was a thumbs up for me to stop talking. Okay.
Oh, no. I was thumbs up. I saw it. Dude. No, a lot of folks are saying thank you. And no, I don't think any of us are rambling at any of this. And these are, do you work with adults in New Hope? We could.
I miss New Hope.
No,
I've been there so long.
Yeah, we honestly, I put the link up to the Bodhana Group webpage just to kind of again review before we close for a great session talking specifically about the Kids on Bike system from Renegade Game Studios, facilitated by Doug Lewandowski, one of the creators. But I know for ourselves, if you are near or in the Pennsylvania area, we do offer training and consultation. We can help you set up your own practice. We can help advise, if you're running a board game group for your practice or your organization, we can help you with your selection of games, and we can help you establish curriculum. There's a ton of different offerings. Also, please make sure with Save Against Fear this year, we're going to be offering a lot of online content. It's our big goal for Save to move it to a conference convention. So this year with COVID, we're actually running Save Against Fear virtually over the weekend of October 9th through 11th. There will be a lot of content run by therapists teaching you about games and different aspects of what they do and how they do it. So there's going to be a wealth of content, but please, we can offer it for folks in Canada. We offer it for CEs. You do not need to take the CEs, actually, unless we're doing it in person. We kind of can't offer you the CEs. But the content, our 101 is theory and application. Day 2 is developing and implementing therapeutically driven content. And we're actually putting the finishing touches on a 301 practicum, which is going to put you with a group of other therapists who are creating a therapeutic one-shot based on case study examples. So you'll be able to plan and run with feedback on both aspects of that, a therapeutic one-shot to kind of practice, you know, the skills that you've been talking about. And again, I would be remiss if I didn't say, please check out Wizards, Warriors, and Wellness. It's available on Drive-Thru RPG. 15 for a print version, 5 for the PDF. That's about as much commercial as I do, I think.
Part 2 coming. Eventually.
Yes, we actually have a board game applications book, probably that'll drop within the next month or so. And our own role-playing game that we're developing, as well as Gates is also working on developing their own role-playing system. So lots of good stuff coming through. And yeah, please email us, reach out to us. So yeah, fantastic. Anything else, I guess, before we go and jump into our other rooms? So I'd say thank you, everyone. This has been wonderful. I hope it was as informative for you as it was fun for us.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, I definitely had fun.
Yeah, be well. Enjoy the rest of GenCon.
Yeah, enjoy your con.
Jack, you didn't tell me your next one was going to be with
Yeah, that's one that, it's not a Bodhana one. That's one that Gates is running.
Wait, what happened? What are we doing? Smoke bombs?
Yeah, there's a lot of ninjas. My God, you guys were amazing at running this chat, man. This has just been.
Yeah, I learned a lot from the last one we did.
Yeah, like I'm saying, I am saving.
Oh crap! Doug is like, "Where are you guys?" All right.
Yeah, I kind of figured. Yeah,
I'm gonna get out of here. You guys have a good. You guys have a good panel. I'll
Look
talk
forward
to you later.
to seeing you, man.
Yeah,
Yep.
James, have a great day with Andy. I'm gonna tell him happy birthday myself, but
Yep.
I will see you tomorrow. I was thinking maybe like around 1 or something to hang out for my birthday.
That sounds good. If I need to bring anything, just message me and let me know.
All right, brother.
All right.
All right.
And then see you, Mike, and we'll see if that Baker guy can make it at all.
I've already told him about it, so woohoo, Baker.
Okay.
All right. Be well,
later.
Cap. All right.